Okay, it's October 16th, 2019. This is George Webb. I'm a reporter in the Washington, D.C. area. We've been reporting on this story of the Russian trolls. You may remember Bogacheva and Krylova, and you may remember me going to the trial for the Russian trolls. Well, one of the trolls that we've talked about in this pair, Bogacheva and Krylova, was briefly detained recently in Minsk. So here's the article saying in Belarus, this gal was briefly detained and then she went back to Moscow, which was interesting. Here you can see the article came out also in the Washington Post, and it talks about how they were involved in, these were the 13 Russians that were affecting the election, that they went through several states in the United States to do, this is the Russians interfering in our elections. You see she has a small child. She was freed from detention in the capital of Belarus, and she's now back in Russia. What's amazing is people don't remember all the states she went to, and being a part of the 9/11 and connected to this warlord named Prigozhin in Moscow. She then also went by the name of using this name Anna Triga. Who knows if she was recruiting snipers or she is a sniper herself, but she used the name Anna Triga. And when I show you her background with the White Russia movement in Russia, this battle organization of Russian nationalists, you may see that as more likely possibility. But you may remember that she created a hoax on 9/11 in 2014 with Krylova about a toxic cloud looming up from Centreville, Louisiana, and heading toward New Orleans. And so if you don't remember the exact facts, the prosecutors said only Bogacheva and Krylova received visas, and they had gone from Nevada, then to California, New Mexico, Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, Louisiana, Texas, and New York to gather information on their plot. And it very much seems like this White Russian network is being cultivated by the CIA as sort of a resistance movement against Vladimir Putin. Now, you'll also see this related story here where it says a Russian tycoon, along with his yachts and jets, has been hit with U.S. sanctions. That's our friend who is the chef, Putin's chef, which is Mr. Prigozhin. Again, we went to the trial. You saw me ask the lawyer for Prigozhin if he'd ever met him. You saw his response saying no comment. Again, this agent here is really more of a business associate and does catering for Putin on occasion and not really his chef, but they got the picture that they wanted here. Again, this gentleman here, Prigozhin, is very involved in this White Russia movement in Ukraine, exporting these snipers and so forth to various countries to do these energy plays for mining and oil and gas drilling. So again, we're connecting the dots here to the actual CIA motives for these connections. Just to give you a little bit more background, ABC News is now covering it, that the woman from the troll factory was detained in Minsk and so forth. But I thought I would go to actual Anna Triga's Twitter, which is still up, and she's tweeted 26 times. And I went through every tweet and did the interpretation or the translation from Russian into English, and most of it centers around the leader of this Born movement, this battle organization of Russian nationalists who created this organization and murdered a couple of journalists in Russia. Again, they're all seeming to be recruited from Moscow State University. As I've said before in our story, Fiona Hill uses Timofeev at Moscow State University to recruit these kind of White Russian nationalists. These are people who would be more than happy to pull the trigger. You can see here she's got a lot of sympathy for this. You can't see the translations here, but it's about this person who is named here. Excuse me, his name is Ilya Gorachev. He's the founder of this white nationalist movement. And most of these things are Gorachev is involved in a murder. Gorachev is been extradited. Bogacheva has been found guilty, and the other two people in the plot of the murder plot of the journalist in Moscow were convicted, and they admitted to the murders. So you'll see here all of her tweets. You can still go to Anna Triga here. But just to give you an idea of the fervence of this white nationalist group in Russia, I'll show you. Here's a thing she retweeted, Bogacheva retweeted, and she says here, "Just great," right? So here's a little bit of the kind of rabble-rousing they do at these rallies. This isn't a soccer event. This is a political rally. So I'll move you forward in this and show you how they kind of get the crowd excited. So it has that kind of Nazi rally feel to it, this Born organization. You can see almost all of her tweets are about this guy right here, which is Goryachev, who is convicted in this murder plot. So we'll move over now to looking a little bit more at this movement. This goes all the way back to Kissinger, recruiting these white Russians. And this is recruiting people from the old white Russian versus red Russian revolution, where people lost a lot of territory against the Bolsheviks. So they're recruiting in this Russian Civil War the sons and daughters and the granddaughters and grandsons to be ultra-nationalists and to take training as snipers and so forth. So you can see by bringing them into the United States, remember they bring in 24, you're going to find that not only are the 68 journalists brought in by Fiona Hill in our story, but these 24 GRU especially are going to be military trained women and men that get brought into the country. And you can see there's opposition movement. It's just called the Yaroslav movement. We won't cover too much, but it emanates from this town just to the northeast of Moscow called Yaroslav. And we can do more details there later. But the key concept here, if you've noticed, is they never produce a picture of Bogacheva. And the reason is they're protecting Bogacheva. If the United States really wanted her in the 2014 attack on 9/11 for the toxic cloud attack, they would extradite her like they extradited her hero, which is this Goryachev, that committed this murder in Moscow. But they don't. They keep showing pictures of Mueller, and whenever they mention Bogacheva, they don't mention they don't show the picture of Bogacheva. You're going to find, again, that Fiona Hill took over this Kissinger recruiting of these white Russians, and these white Russians are being painted red like they're Putin's, but actually they're quite the opposite. They're the opposition group called Born, B-O-R-N-E, to Putin in Russia.